3 p.m. And we'll be starting this the agenda with the introductions, which is name, position, and pronoun. I'll start with pronouns. I'll start with myself. I'm Layla. I'm the SLCC SG Vice President. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Let's start with Amber first.
Amber Coleman, Senator 3, Pro Temp of the Senate, she, her, hers.
William Tomsuri, Senator 4, Senate Treasury Officer, he, him.
Emmett.
My name is Emin Akulma, pronouns are he, him, his, Senator 1.
Father.
I'm Mr. Dell, Senator Seat number 2, and my pronouns is he, him, his.
Della, Senator Position 5, they, them.
Rain Kondo, Senator Position 6, she, hers.
My name is Deontay Carter, and I am the substitute advisor for today's.
You want me to introduce myself? I'm Sean Weiland. I'm the interim chair of the governing documents committee.
Kenzie Scott, staff director. She,
Uh,
her.
Brian Ava Everett, current ASLCC SG president, and she, her.
Thank you, everyone. So the second thing would be the approval of the agenda. Does anyone want to add anything or remove anything on the agenda? Has everyone seen the agenda?
Download.
It's up on the screen, so
Yes.
I can't see that far.
There has been one change made since your email version of this, and it was adding the Constitution draft discussion today, just to point that out.
Are we talking about inclusivity officer?
Yes,
So the agenda that you sent us didn't have whatever discussion for the governing document. Okay. And why did you include it?
I added this because Sean needed to present us with a draft today, or else it's not going to pass through by the time that it needs presented to us.
And the item 8.
Yeah.
Yes, William.
Are we talking about the inclusivity officer today?
Does not like it.
There's nothing more.
Inclusivity document next week. So it's not there, then just leave it up.
I don't know if I can.
Mhm.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Am I able to add something onto this agenda, or they need a motion to add something onto this agenda?
after the point that it has been posted officially, you would need to make a motion to change
And
the
if
agenda.
we're just waiting.
That's what I was
Okay.
thinking.
Wait, but then you wanted what you wanted to add?
Just asking.
Don't you have to make a motion for what you just added right now? The discussion.
Oh, really?
Amber?
It did happen before the meeting, but technically I probably should have done that prior.
Okay, we'll just keep it that way.
So I could make a motion to vote in this agenda as it is currently.
Yes.
Because we have a typical point of committee updates, this can be discussed during that time, it would just take longer than usual. So you don't necessarily need to amend the agenda, there's already a place for it if you need it to be fit in there.
I'll just do that just for purpose. Fine. Procedure here.
So do we have it?
No,
We'll just discuss it during another point that's already on here.
Okay. Does anyone has anything else to add or remove from the agenda for today? Yes, Brian.
I actually just wanted to point clarification for preparatory standpoint, considering item 7B, I guess, sustainability tier 1 staff position.
So We had decided that this position, we were going to make a position.
Correct.
Has anything happened with it, or do we have any candidates or anything like
Not at
that?
the moment.
That's what I wanted to see.
Okay.
But if we could take that out.
If you'd like to have a discussion about it, I have no issues with it as it is your agenda as a Senate.
Would you like to?
I'd like to just keep it in
So now that no one has anything else for the agenda, yes. Yes.
Approval of what minutes? Because I haven't got.
there. There were so many that I just said minutes in general.
There were,
So
I
we
think,
could approve
3.
what minutes were available.
So which one were available? Because I haven't received.
There were 3 Senate meetings, that's what I,
Can I direct my question to the
Yes.
President?
yes.
What minutes are we supposed to approve?
So as the current state, no minutes are to be ratified by the previous. 2 things have occurred. The first meeting where we did the video, the audio didn't come out, so minutes were unable to be produced. And secondarily, for the last meeting, we're currently in process of putting closed captioning on that video. It is currently available online. But we will be getting all that information out to you before the next meeting.
Yes.
A good point of info, which is just that because we are using a new format, I asked for a little period of grace where I'm hurdling some technical difficulties and getting that.
In that case, I move to amend this agenda. And Amber, if you are okay with that, we can include whatever you remove under item 8 at the same time, because there's no need to have approval of the minutes from the past meeting.
Again?
So
Yes.
he's making a motion to remove the approval of minutes and add in the discussion of the Constitution
Okay.
under item 8, correct?
So Emily, you
I would say.
so you're removing the approval of minutes and instead,
Not instead, also
also include what again?
Constitutional or Constitution draft discussion under
8.
yes.
Okay. Okay, so Emma makes a motion to approval of minutes and also to removing the approval of minutes and also including the constitutional discussion under item 8, and I'm seconded by Amber. Right? Okay.
no discussion.
You have to vote for this, right? Can you spell your name again?
DELA.
I hope I got all of you. Okay, let's start with Amber.
Aye.
William?
Aye.
Emmett?
Aye.
Alden?
Aye.
Dylan?
Aye.
Rin? Aye. Okay, that's the right order, right? Okay.
Can approve the agenda by you sent now.
Is there anything else that you'd like to remove or add? Okay, so we'll go to the next. That's a vote consent. Statements from the plenary. Nothing. Zero.
No one except. Did you want to speak? No one.
Okay. Next, we have organizational updates and announcements. We'll start with OSA, Osberg.
Hi everyone, I'm Marcella, campus organizer for Osborne here at Lane, pronouns she, her, hers. I've got a few updates. You check out the Register Guard. I don't remember the day exactly, but we got a letter to the editor published on textbook affordability, so that's really exciting. And I know you can find a couple others in Register Guard and Eugene Weekly that New Vote students got published. And that was all from our day of action last week, where all across the country, students submitted over 200 letters to the editor, and over 24 of them got published. So really exciting. Really hoping to build the buzz on textbooks issue. And we've got a lot of stuff coming up too. Biggest things next Monday, we have our Osberg Lobby Day. We'll be up in Salem for the whole day, talking with our representatives and senators about issues like 100% renewable energy, prescription drug prices, student hunger, and more. And all of you are welcome and invited to come join us. If you're interested in coming, please talk to me after this event and I can give you more of the details they can sign up. But that's completely free, you're welcome, and open for everyone. Two other things. We're also going to Grassroots Garden on Saturday to tackle hunger in the area. We've ever been to Grassroots Garden, really cool. All of the food that they grow in the garden goes to the food pantry, and they also feed you vegan lunch at 1 p.m. So folks will be heading out at 11 and coming back around 2. So if you're interested in that as well, talk to me afterward. And the last thing is next Tuesday is iHeart Primaries Day. So student perks all across the country are going to be getting excited about the upcoming caucuses and primaries in the state and working to register students all across the country that day. So we're going to be joining them. We'll be registering students to vote from 10 to 2. So if you're not registered to vote, you should definitely stop by our table and we can help you out with that. Those are all the updates I have. Again, if you're interested in Lobby Day, please come talk to me afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you, Marcella. Next, we have the ASLC CSG advisor.
Updates on student elections. Candidacy will close next Wednesday. And voting will begin and campaigning will begin on that following Monday. And February 6th, we're going to close voting polls.
February 6th.
Yes, March 6th, I'm sorry, my bad. March 6th, we will close vote polls. We are in the process right now of developing some more marketing advertisement for candidacy applications. Still some things we have to tweak. And then shortly after that, in the beginning week of campaigning, we will put some marketing advertisement for voting for those candidates. And as well as some supplemental information on who the candidates are and things like that. And I'm still waiting to hear back from the debate advisor. Also, get more applicants and their perspective if they want to even have a debate. So,
Right.
To our advisor, I guess a question. For advertisement purposes, is there any plan to do like tabling or anything that's out in the public space to increase visibility and work, etc.?
most certainly, there will be tabling. I want to say there will be tabling. Tabling the week after next in the center building. And if I do remember so correctly, yes, so tabling will begin around February 17th. And as far as that goes, I might as well just let you know. So it's going to be on the first floor, and I believe it's 6 tables, anywhere from 5 to 6 tables. And whoever is going to be tabling, you can have 2 to a table. That's fine. But if you do table, you are responsible for the setup and take down of your table. And as well, you will not have the same table when you return the next day. So just want to give you all the disclaimer. I do not want there to be any favoritism or popular census or ownership that people think that this table belongs to them. That's why I've made the recommendation that whoever will be tabling are not allowed to be at the same table instead. Be at a different spot.
Yes.
Can I get a reminder of what this is? Because it's first floor tabling.
Yes, this is for campaigning.
Okay.
Campaigning for student government positions and seats on Senate as well as SAFC.
Okay. Next, we have the LCC organizations and clubs. Anyone has any announcements or updates?
LCC what?
Organizations and clubs. Do you have anything?
So like, what kind of information are we looking for? Because right now, I'm currently working with Abisu and the dance club to come together to have a hula collaboration for the 20th. That is a performance with NASA. That's about probably the only news I really have right now.
Anyone else?
I do
Yes,
have news. So the BSU are planning or is working on 2 events. The first one is that too. So I don't know what this one is about, but it seems like it's an event that we're invited and we'll be tabling. That'll be great. So the 2 events that I wanted to talk about was for the screening, and that will be on February 13th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. And the second one is an event about mass incarceration in the USA. And that will be on February 20th from 5 to 8 p.m. So you are all invited, and it's Black History Month. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, Amber.
As well for Black History Month, there's going to be an event tonight at the Graduate Hotel, tomorrow at the Graduate Hotel. Thank you. There's going to be a social starting at 5:30. It goes till 6:30 p.m. and then a banquet from 7 to 8:30. There's going to be one of our district court judges putting on the event for Black History Month. So tickets though, it looks like there may be a fee for tickets and tables. So keep that in mind.
How much are the tickets?
A table for 8 is $750.
How about the ticket to attend, or is it free for anybody?
It's $95 for one.
$95 for one ticket.
Okay. Yes, William.
Yeah, so I want to tell you guys about the Oregon Student Association Lobby Day yesterday. We went to the Capitol yesterday to lobby for 3 things. The first thing,
But that, you're not allowed to be.
we're not allowed to say that.
That's
No, point.
that
Or
you
just
can
the
say
day.
that when I ask for reports, which is after that.
This
But
is
if you have
organization.
anything related to the SSC clubs,
Oh, sorry. Okay. I take back what I said.
Okay. Is there anyone else that has anything about clubs or organizations here at LCC in the campus? Nothing? Okay. So next we go to the governance council reports, executive officer reports, senator and staff reports, committee updates. Let's start with the governance council reports.
Say something.
Yes.
Student Affairs Council is very juicy. We're meeting tomorrow, but I could still use one more student government representative. So if you'd like to join me, please find me after this meeting. It's very juicy, I promise.
What time?
It's 1 to 3.
The SAFC, so.
SAC, Student Affairs Council,
Oh,
the best council.
Executive officer reports.
So reporting on things that we were talking about last week, the Council of Clubs has voted 12-0 and with one vote abstaining to start work integrating the Council of Clubs and the student government in the capacity that we discussed previously. So we'll be looking at making the Council of Clubs chair a student government position that is elected within its own body. And that way we can create more stability and security within the Council of Clubs and also make their funds as the Council of Clubs more available to each individual club for any sort of event or work that they are looking to do directly. We also, as a student government, have now the first bit of prep for a hidden curriculum board panel, which will be occurring on February the 10th. And it's largely a faculty-facing student panel that talks about how what we as students learn during our time here and how we can communicate that to our faculty so that they better engage and better support our students and make them more successful across campus. Well, that's my executive report.
Thank you, Brian. Senator reports. Yes, Anna.
I'll be attending the Diversity Council meeting tomorrow at 9 and I'll be next.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So yesterday, I went to a lobby day with 6 other students. I'm really excited to say that we got something done yesterday. But first, what we lobbying about yesterday was 3 bills. The first one is food insecurity. We want to make sure that we know they passed a bill that will kind of like hire a contractor to gather all the research that have been doing in Oregon about food insecurity and how we can better do that. The second thing is higher education task force for the underrepresented, which will create a task force that will go around Oregon colleges to kind of talk to students and see what kind of help they can give to underrepresented students, which is defined by student of LGBTQ, student of color, student parents, student in rural community, and many more that I cannot remember on top of my head. And the third one, I believe, is transfer credits. So they want to kind of like universalize in Oregon that make sure all transfer credit can be transferable even without AAOT or ASOT. So like I'm thinking for 6 cents right now, it would be transfer if they direct transfer to U of O, but this bill would fix that. And one exciting thing is that we talked to 4 senators, and all 4 of them, really like this bill, and 3 of 4 is supporting it, and 1 of 4 is strongly thinking of supporting it. And what happened yesterday was the underrepresented higher education underrepresented task force bill just passed out of the House Education Committee and now going to the Joint Way and Mean. So it's pretty exciting. This is step closer to becoming law.
Any more senator reports? Yes.
So tomorrow I will be attending the FC meeting, partially on behalf of Osberg as well as the dance club. I'll also be attending a lobby training for Monday, as Osberg is going to the lobby day training up in Salem, and I'll be at that from 8 to 5, so I'll have a report for that as well.
Any more reports?
Have the staff report.
Yes.
To piggyback off of what Will said with student food insecurity, I am waiting on the response of admin or administration for the approval of EBT Snack Shack. So fingers crossed. And I've already done a lot of legwork, so it should be fairly graceful. And as well, I just need to submit this work order, and we will have ASLCC's banner which has the link to elections posted at the bus loop. So
Thank you. Okay. Committee updates. Yes.
On Tuesday, I submitted the first draft of the new constitution for all the senators to read over. Hopefully, we'll have a discussion with your input and feedback regarding that in later in the meeting.
Thank you. Okay, next we move to item 7, Senate-owned business. Sustainability Tier 1 staff position discussion. Yes.
So I just wanted to bring this back up again because we decided that we were going to hire a sustainability tier 1 staff position, and I believe we haven't had any applicants yet. And I was just wondering where we got this posted to, and who knows about this position and any way that we can get this filled quicker. Because we've already gone this far of the year without that position filled. So I guess, can I ask a direct question?
Yes.
President, so where did this job posting go to?
Directly speaking, it hasn't been posted.
Okay. Do you know when it will be posted?
Not at the given moment.
Who's in charge of getting it posted?
Primary would be onto me, and then it hasn't been delegated to any of my staff at this point.
Okay, all right, fair enough. And I was also wondering if there's any way that we could, I know that there's some Osberg, and some different groups like that. Is there any way to get like a newsletter or an email sent out to those groups? Would that be unfairly distributing a position to?
Not at all. I will say, up until lately, and I do believe it is still not quite viable, Engage has been our main platform for getting information out. And although I have heard in the last week that yes, it's working, no, it's not, yes, it is, I'm not sure about its current status, but we'll make sure within the if possible, can I give up some of my time to Deontay?
Yes.
Engage is working with technical difficulties, and student elections advertisement has already been posted on Engage.
Does anyone else have any more information on this?
Does anyone have any questions or just this discussion about the tier 1 position?
Can I get clarity on what the sustainability position is?
Explain a little bit. It's going to be a staff position through the student government that is going to be in charge of helping with sustainability in different departments around the college. And with, do you have any more than that?
Yes, Brian.
So the entire idea of the sustainability advocate position is largely to do, as Amber was previously saying, looking at sustainability work across our campus. The primary project for it in addition to working with the Green Science Club with the plastics project that they are currently working on, which is putting a plastics recycle
Station.
apparatus station here on campus so that we can do plastic recycle locally. In addition to that, there's the green office certification that we're looking at for the primary project. And then it would be working with not only other student groups if they have environmentally facing initiatives, but going to the Green Science Club and being part of that, as well as being one of our people on the Sustainability Council.
Okay. Any more discussions about that? Nope. Okay, next, bond support discussion. Yes, Brian.
Brett Rowlett will actually be doing a presentation to the Senate during work session on Tuesday concerning the bond, as some changes happened when the Board of Education, they voted to move from the highest level that they could down to a moderate level, and Brett Rowlett will be meeting with the Senate here on Tuesday to have a discussion about what that looks like for each of the senators, so that we can talk more in depth about how we may be able to support the bond if that is what the Senate would like to do.
Questions, discussion? Amber?
That was just the discussion I wanted to have, is whether or not we've had a full look at this, or when we get a full look at this bond, what kind of steps we would take in support of this. Because it sounded like from our last work session, a lot of the issues students are facing and a lot of the problems that we have could potentially be solved by supporting this bond and getting it to pass. So I just wanted to have another look at that. It sounds like we're gonna get some more information next week, so that's all I have.
Okay. Does anyone want to ask anything else about the bond discussion, bond support discussion? No? Yes, Emma.
I still need to look into it, so.
I know that we're going to talk more about it in depth, but the changes that have been made, is it affecting how much the bond would have been able to collect?
Yeah, the primary change, I believe, was it moving from $144 billion collected over 5 years, I believe it is, down to 114. But we'll have more information on Tuesday.
Okay. No more discussions about that? Okay, next. Okay, so new Senate business, new senator discussion. Oh, okay. Upcoming student government elections. Do you want to add anything else?
Nah, I think I touched all bases. Oh, wait. Yes, we have advertised, just to let you all know what we've been doing. We have publication on Titan Times, Lane Weekly, Engage, which pretty much falls on Titan Times, falls under Engage. We have touched all bulletin boards for the most part on campus. We have put out handbills as well, and have active people getting the word out. I'd like to see from my students more people filling out the application, but that's it.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Welcome week.
Are we already at the end of the term?
Please, Amber.
So, yeah, we're not at the end of the term yet, but we are getting pretty close. And I feel that last term, we had a few issues with Welcome Week, so I was hoping to get an early look at it this term and kind of solidify some dates and times. I also wanted to let everybody know I've been speaking with some directors over in some CTE departments and stuff, and they would very much appreciate being part of Welcome Week. And I'm trying to locate a good spot and time to do like some evening Welcome Week hours over there. If anyone is interested in helping out with that, I think we have one or two. And I just didn't know if we had a solid plan yet for Welcome Week or what the senators wanted to do, or if Bryant had any information on that for us.
Yes, Brian.
Okay, so the term officially begins next term, 3:30. So that would be Sunday. So we would be looking at, basically, we typically run at least 3 days where we will be providing coffee, snacks, things like that. A request has gone in through Engage for tabling and setup of a tent between building 4 and 5 during regular school hours. And typically we run from 8 a.m. until usually around noon to 1. During this time, we're also going to be reaching out to the Council of Clubs and the in process of forming Union of Unions so that we can get more hands on deck for some of these events. But largely the part that we're looking at is from the student government side. I would love for senators, staff, etc., to take lead on either shifts or time or helping to set up takedown, etc. But that will largely depend, as I am well aware, upon all students' availability and dependent upon what they have for schedules.
Yes, Emma.
So when do you say that the term officially begins and when are we trading for the welcome?
So term officially begins 3/30, 2020.
2030, okay, 2020, which is a Sunday after.
What's that? Yeah, that's the Sunday.
Are we tabling it?
We would start tabling that Monday at 8 a.m. So that would be March the 31st, 2020 through, oh no, pardon, that is the Monday. So March 30th through March the 1st would be our typical run for Welcome Week. Yes. What about the one?
And when did you say we are planning on doing it? Building 4 and 5 or above 3 and 4? So,
Yes.
So the direct breezeway between buildings 4 and 5, so that main avenue that goes from the clock tower through to Central right here on the other side of this building is the main place that we usually have food, coffee, snacks of some sort or another. And I would love to take feedback upon what kind of things we would like to see out there as it is a student government event. But that would be a good work session discussion when we get to that.
I'm good.
Yes, Emma.
So while we're thinking about maybe moving that table to somewhere on campus, what?
Well, I'm waiting to hear back from Lynn, because she heads all of the CTE programs, and I'd like to get her work. So I've just heard some suggestions from a few different people. It's looking like possibly inside of building 16 or 19. Depending, they're going to look at some of the classes and where they're being held during the evenings. A lot of like the drafting and design and technology classes are all morning classes, so they're pretty good with the welcome week that we have. So it's probably going to end up being on this side of campus over here by 18 or 19, most likely. And it's sounding like the best hours are probably going to be 4 to 7 to be able to hit that group of students.
Any more discussion about the welcome week? Suggestions? Yes, Emma.
I would just suggest that we have a sign up and we have all the hours filled by March 15th or something like that was my idea, just so that we don't run into not having senators and student government out at those spots and present during that. I know that may be a little difficult to do it any sooner than that based on new classes and scheduling and things of that nature.
Is that doable with the president?
Yes.
I think so. Secondarily, I mean, I am always welcoming other people to take the charge on different events that we do, or either the planning, et cetera, et cetera. So if you would like to take any part of the coordination, I'd be happy to defer to.
Amber, you had something to say?
No.
Not yet? Okay. Yes.
Question. So the date for beginning is of Welcome Week is what again?
March
You have in
30th.
mind?
March 30th
March
through
30th.
April 1st. So the 30th, 31st, and 1st is what it's looking like currently.
It's, no. It's only got
Okay. Any more suggestions or comments? Anything? Yes.
actually one more question. So, is it okay with the group if we start doing some marketing advertisement on Welcome Week? Maybe after campaign ends?
Yes. Amber?
I think that would be a pretty good idea. Let students know that it's coming. I don't see why that would be a problem. I know it might be a little busy during campaign and then voting, but maybe as soon as the voting is over, we actually get anybody.
After voting then? Okay. No problem.
Anyone else okay with that? Okay. Any more discussions? Okay. Next we have the constitutional discussion. Right? Yes. Yes.
Shauna, would you like me to pull this up on the screen here?
That would be helpful, but that would kind of lend to suggesting people read it in the moment. Hopefully they've already read it and they'll read it sometime offline. Sitting here reading during a meeting is not an effective use of time, in my opinion. Bringing it up for reference wouldn't hurt though.
Yes, we
I thought it's not like that.
yes.
Well, it wasn't, and then Amy had made a motion and added it into his motion, so that now is an item.
Okay, discussion about constitutional. Yes.
Somebody needs to yield time to me.
Anyone?
I would like to yield my time, Sean, please.
Yes.
So the way that this is set up in the Constitution and the whole process basically breaks down that the student government, the senators, all of you representing the student body, will vote to, if you agree with the way this Constitution draft or a future version of the Constitution draft looks, you will all vote, and if a simple majority says, yes, we agree with this, then it goes on to the ballot, which will be produced along with voting representatives, so that we have 3 or 4 weeks before that happens. So the way it breaks down, I will take as many swings at this draft as I need to get it right, but we only have official meetings to make official decisions on what needs to be changed, what needs to be altered, what you as a group like, what you don't like, what you feel represents the best interests of the students in this Constitution. And that's basically how this whole thing works. What I've done is I've taken the old Constitution and made changes to it that are written by a strikeout or red text indicating new text or the replacement of old text in the case of a strikeout. And that is just kind of a highlight of what the changes are in the draft. They are somewhat spread out throughout the document. There are numerous small changes. The big ones, though, are representing in the election section. 7.3 is basically new, and that is to represent Brian's vision of encompassing senators who represent school departments rather than just the entire student body. If Bryant wants to fill in more details on that, or if you're all comfortable with where her head's at on that, then great. If you're not, then this is a very bare bones description of how that works. Some editing may be needed on the language to get it correct.
Yes, Brian.
In addition to what you're seeing in 7.3, on the next page, there's also the direct layout of what those pools are and sort of how they're set up. So this was brought together and is the largest change within this document. The other quick changes for direct consideration are extending the amount of mid-Senate meetings, etc. But that also, so it extends the number by one, but it means that we also included work sessions in that. So if a singular senator misses 5 basically work required meetings, they would be liable to get hit with a non-fulfillment of duty. So that's just a heads up on the edit there as it directly affects senators first. And then also throughout the document, we're looking at changing the nomenclature for the Lane Community College student government to that from the Associated Students of Lane Community College student government. For brevity's sake, it would shorten the acronym, and when we refer to ourselves and the group as a whole on campus, from ASLCCSG to just LCCSG. So some direct changes.
Yes, John.
What's yield time?
They're not even. Yes.
I want to go.
Thank you. Section 8.3 and 8.3.1 and 8.3.2, they look like they bleed into the elections, but they're actually regarding backfilling Senate seats. Traditionally, at least in my experience, between the spring term and the fall term when the student government actually starts doing their job, there are oftentimes empty seats as a result of changes of plans in students' lives, lack of interest, just any number of things that change, and we wind up with a much less full Senate than we had intended to have. So this presents an opportunity for, by the book, senators to be filled in from elections who thought they didn't get a seat. And that's the general gist of it. I really encourage each of you to read over the entire thing and compare it to the original Constitution that you're all abiding by now. But I don't want to influence your opinions by stating how things work from my perspective. I need you to read it and see how you think that it looks like it works. Because this is for all of our students saying, this is what your job is. This is how to hold you accountable.
Yes.
And thank you. There are some additional protections for trans students as well that are not upheld in the Constitution of Lane Community College, that aren't upheld necessarily at all levels of leadership. But I thought it was really important that the student government is held to higher standards that the student government offer protection to trans students.
Is it this section?
Yeah. It seemed upsetting that it wasn't in there in the beginning. But it's in there now.
Yes. Let's go with Emma first.
Section of Article 5.3.
Brian, Mackenzie, and Sean. Emma is.
Is asking something.
Yeah.
So I can see that it has been moved to the bylaws. And I just want to know why.
These are, sorry.
I yield the rest of my time to Sean.
These are procedural matters and not necessarily rules that the overall student body needs to know about. They don't necessarily care how a designated senator is elected to their position, so it belongs in bylaws because it's how things are done rather than what you can hold the government accountable for.
Yes, Amber. You had a question?
I did.
So,
I remember that. it's a direct question for Shauna. So, I'm not seeing the part, but when it comes to fulfillment of duties,
Mhm.
what's the logic behind moving it from 4 to 5 in a term for being able to miss meetings? Because looking at 5, it looks like we have about 24 work sessions / Senate meetings in a term, correct? 5 is a pretty good majority of it already. I almost feel like it should be kept at 4. That's just my opinion. That's open for everybody else. But if we only have 24 meetings total, and someone misses 5 of those, that's a pretty significant amount of missed time.
So my thoughts on that are, for life reasons, it would make sense, like, if there's 4 at that, like, to allow somebody those 4. But if they miss a 5th one, at that point, they're not fulfilling their duties. So it kind of seems like 4 would be, it is a massive amount, but life does happen, especially if it's including work study as well as the Senate meetings. That 5th one would probably be like, all right, like, that is where it's done. So to me, it makes sense.
So if you look at the next section, 8.4.3, extenuating circumstances, as accepted by the college and verified, are grounds to suspend the non-fulfillment of duty rulings. So I'm going to yield some of my time to Shauna because I think you might be able to explain this.
So in the current constitution, it's set at 4 Senate meetings, does not include the work sessions. So if you meet 10 times during the 10 weeks, not counting finals, we just often skip, sometimes we want to skip. If you have 10 meetings, then missing 4 of those is 40% of the meetings. This expansion increases the number to 5, but also doubles the number of meetings that are included. So instead of 10, you would have 20, 5 being 25%, so it's a much smaller percentage of the required meetings to be present, but it does allow for more one-off cases of something going wrong where you need to step out.
Makes sense. Can I yield some of my time to Nancy, please?
To illustrate what this looks like as far as senator requirements, there are probably, I did the math. There are 3 senators that by midterms last year would have been grounds for NFD. So you know what the attendance, you as a senator know what the attendance looked like last year. By week 5, we had 3 senators who were grounds for NFD according to the new constitution.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you for explaining it to me. I would just hate to be more lenient and not have people present during Senate meetings based on this, but the way you explained it makes sense. All right.
Yes,
The representative senators for the department, and the way it was structured in 7.3, like having 2 pools, it is really confusing to me, and that makes me feel like I may not be able to support it. So
which one is it again?
7.3 would be grouped into 2 pools. Once all senators fulfill the same duties and responsibilities. So I use the rest of my time to Shannon or whoever it is.
If you want to take this one.
So intent and purpose, right? We can definitely do some changes on the wording of this adjustment, but this largely sets up the skeleton of being able to have the departments champion senators. So these representative senators are ones that come from departmental groups. So we're talking about, say, CT programs want to champion a senator and they get sign off from their dean, et cetera, and that would be laid out in our bylaws. But what this allows for is that pool 1 up to, say, 4 of the seats are representative senators, and no more than that can be put on by that in our first swing. And then the secondary pool are students at large, so people that are not affiliated directly with a department. Oh, and largely speaking, as has been brought up in multiple discussions of this, is the biggest intent of this from the start of this year is diversifying the pool of people that we get on the Senate. So the example being getting somebody from, say, CT programs, getting somebody from physical arts, getting somebody from math and science, and then say one of the social sciences groups and communication. But it allows us to both represent more students, but then secondarily, as we have seen historically low student engagement numbers, we can create a system that makes it so that the departments themselves are incentivized to bring people into the student government.
December.
I'm just curious on how this is gonna work with elections. So there's gonna be 2 separate election polls, essentially. Is that gonna have to have some new like programming and some new? Can I yield some of my time to Brian? Please, Brian.
It wouldn't affect this current election,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, when this takes effect.
But in the future, yes, what we'd be looking at is there would be 2 qualifications to get onto the ballot. You could either run as a department champion or representative student, or as a student at large.
Emma first, and then William.
Okay. So I read it and I thought like we need at least to have 4 senators that are endorsed by any kind of department on campus, and the rest of the 4 will be fulfilled by the student at large. Am I right on that?
So long as there are 4 champion Senate seats, yes. So in the case that only 3 come from departments, such as likely in the first year, we won't see that full 4. It would make it so that the other, so if 2 were championed by 1 set from a department, the other 6 would be filled by at-large students.
And direct response to that. So if 2 candidates, one is from the student at large, has more votes than the other that was sponsored or endorsed by the department, the one from the department will have the seat and the one from at large will not get it?
Correct. So we would be earmarking 4 of the seats for representative purposes. And that is the maximum of the amount of representative seats that would be there. So that would make it so that those 4 seats prioritize to representative and
William?
department.
Would it be unfair for a student who got the majority of the vote to not get voted in? And second question after that, would the student be able to distinguish which senator is running on a basis of like a department endorsed basis, as opposed to they're running as an at-large senator? And you might have to Kenzie.
So to bring in some mathy stuff, and what the question that Amy asked was, would a student who had more votes who had more votes than a student who was department backed. So let's call these pool 1 students and pool 2 students. So the pool 2 student technically has more votes than pool 1. And the answer is technically yes, pool 1 would get the seat first. However, the only way that pool 2 student wouldn't get on the Senate is if, actually there is no way for pool 2 student not to get on the Senate. If pool 1 student got on and had fewer votes, pool student would still be on. Does that make sense? So it's the top 4 from pool 1 and the top 4 from pool 2. So pool 2 student wouldn't be kicked out by pool 1 student.
I'm still done yet.
And then to answer William's second question is, I think it would be perfectly reasonable on the ballot to have, your name, let's say that I ran as a senator, it'd be Kenzie Scout, social science would be in parentheses, as opposed to Kenzie Scout, student at large, just in case I did or didn't get the department backing.
Direct question to that. Yeah, what I'm asking is, so pool 1 is at large, yeah? And pool 2 is departmental.
So
Pool
vice
2
versa.
is, pool 2 is the,
At large, pool 1 is the representative.
So you think, let's say pool two, right? Let's say there's like 8 people running for pool two, and the fifth person who got the most votes, let's say they got 100 votes, but the fourth person in pool one got 50 votes. Then the fourth person from pool one would get instead of from pool five.
Yes, Amber.
That is my only issue with this. I like the idea, and I like the fact that we're trying to get better diversity, and we want to have departments somewhat involved in elections. But I just really don't know how I feel about people getting 100 votes and someone else getting 50, filling that seat. When someone else is endorsed by more of the students in general, because my issue with this is if you're having more students vote for you, then these people are voting for you, they want you, you're representing them. If we're only, bringing in people for half of the Senate that maybe only got 20 votes each, but there were 4 candidates. We have 4 candidates on the Senate with only 10 to 20 votes each, but they get those 4 seats. And then we have 4, open seats where people are getting hundreds of votes representing multiple people, but these people, just because they got backed by a department, have a very, very high leg up in the elections. That's my only concern with this.
Stella, Emmett,
So I have a thought on that. If somebody is being backed specifically by a department, it would make sense that they wouldn't necessarily get the same amount of student votes. They are representing a department, so they're not necessarily reaching out to the entire student body. They are reaching out to their department, whether it be that math, be that physical arts, whatever. So while yes, somebody may only get 50 votes versus 100, they are specifically probably getting 50 votes backed by their department. So it would yes, maybe the numbers outweigh, but the impact that they have is going to be far more direct than somebody who's a student at large, where they have access to hundreds if not thousands of students versus maybe 100 to a couple hundred.
Emmett.
So my direct question to that is, are we supposed to work for the student or the department?
I would imagine it's about representing the students in that department.
So if that's the case,
No, it's the department.
Brian.
So there are 3 different things that I'd like to touch back on. So first and foremost, as student representatives, you represent students. And even in this sort of bylaw, you represent students. And there is no direct stipulation about which students you represent, which ones you do not. To the point that Amber brought up is a direct concern about, the lowest representative senator getting 50 votes and the 5th place at-large student getting 100, let's say. I understand why that feels sort of icky, right? Directly speaking, we're talking about more students voted for one versus another. But I do wish to highlight that 7.3.3 as another part of this. And directly speaking, that makes it so that any candidates who do not make it into a filled position are still next in line should somebody, non-fulfillment of duty, choose to go away from the college for whatever reason, as we have our own turnover within the space. And then tritarily, we're vying for engagement on campus from the departments to increase the amount of candidates that we have. So we need to have something that we are giving them in that exchange so that they are engaged with us and that they are paying attention to how this works, right? Because we can't, in a no-sum or a no-plus game, just demand that departments become engaged without offering them something. So they are getting through some of the red tape and some guaranteed seats in exchange for doing a lot of the legwork, especially in finding candidates for these sorts of positions.
William.
Okay, yeah. Well, I'm agree with the idea that we definitely should do more to be able to represent students who might not be represented in the first place in our Senate seat right now. But I would like to say that I feel like this idea is great, but we could work on it more too. And there's not a set of idea that will be the best idea that will benefit more students. So I think we should discuss more about that.
Amber.
Yeah, the more I'm thinking about it, the more I don't like really anything about this. I get the idea. I get that we're trying to reach out to departments, but isn't that what the inclusivity officer is supposed to do? Isn't that what all senators are supposed to do? I think that this may be better served as maybe putting something in our bylaws saying that during the term, X amount of senators, we have to hit these spaces. Our outreach has to be in these spaces, and we make sure that as us 8 senators, we're feeling that we're doing these obligations. We're holding ourselves accountable. I don't like. I've never heard of any Senate in any state or the country saying this Senate seat has to be filled by somebody who's endorsed by this. We're just kind of changing everything, and this just isn't how Senate gets elected. This is just us completely making a new election process, and yeah,
That's different.
it's
Point of information, I'll be voting on this today.
No.
we're discussing.
Okay.
Emmett.
So I kind of share the opinion from Amber. I mean, I like the idea of having like those 4 senators filled by people from endorsed by different departments. But I would like to have an article in the Constitution stating that whoever gets the most number of votes overrides anything. That's all I want. Otherwise, I can't really support this idea.
Brian.
Well,
Yes.
I think Brian has to be yielded time.
I'm a
Okay.
ex officio member. So directly speaking, right, that would invalidate a lot of the purpose that's going on here. And by putting something in the bylaws, we're not saying that it's the fault of any senators at this point or in the future that we don't have representation on this campus, right? By making the outreach, as we learned at the beginning of this year, by making the outreach in specific zones directly dispersed out in the ways that we were trying to structure it in the first term, we learned that that was not an effective way to get more student voice. And in fact, in exit interviews with senators who have left positions, it was one of the largest impediments and things that they hated about their job. So if we're looking at the longevity of the senator pool, that was something that was being taken into consideration. The secondary part, right, is that we have been having these discussions in the Governing Documents Committee since the beginning of term. And I would love to invite each and every one of you to take part in that discussion. The next one I have been updated is this Friday. I will yield the rest of my time to Kenzie for location and time.
Yeah, we've moved the location this Friday because we're hosting the Democratic debates. So it'll be off campus, but it's still open to, I believe, anybody on student government. So if you are interested in joining us, I highly recommend, because we've been having this discussion back and forth of should we not add this for quite some time. So I would recommend if anybody is invested in how this turns out, come take a voting seat in the Governing Documents Committee. I'll also point out that the point isn't to get more representation on campus of different student voices. The point is to have, that's a bonus, but the point is to have a buy-in from departments, because departments tend to be these silos, and we can utilize departments to get the word out about student government and to unify the campus.
Could we not just let departments back candidates without designating senator seats for them? Like, we could have this department back this candidate and they could put that on their elections, but without writing this into the Constitution. I'll yield the time to Kenzie.
Yeah, sure, we could definitely do that, but what would be the point? I don't think departments would feel like there's much going on for them to get excited about, because they can do that right now. They can say, well, Amber Coleman's running for a Senate seat next year, and we as the, what's your nature?
Criminal justice.
We as the criminal justice, department, social science department, right? We back Amber Coleman. They could just say that. They could say that about any student. The question is, how can we buy in? How can we give them something?
Well, my question to that would be, has any department done that in the past? Have they backed Senate? So do they know they can, first of all? And secondly, just them giving that and saying that would probably engage some more students from that department if they're seeing that and they're giving them that endorsement. Of course, that's going to help. So I don't see why that wouldn't.
Yes, Brian.
So 2 points, right? So there are 2 large things that I think are hanging in the air. Most student governments, so if we look at the student government Senate, especially from Oregon State University and the University of Oregon, those seats are run for by department. So this is not an unusual sort of buy-in and tie-in for a student government structured thing to exist, is one part that I wanted to point out. But then secondarily, the departments are aware that they can back. I had meetings with them in the first term of this year because when I was putting together the original discussion points about this, right, I went to the all deans meeting and spoke to them about their thoughts on this and getting feedback from them. And they buy off on the idea, right, of doing the backing and having things set up, especially as there are student governments that have senates that are in existence in this style. So it is us taking things that we know have been successful for increasing student engagement at other campuses and bringing it here.
William.
Yeah, I was gonna say, cause like I know UFO and OSU, they do like department-based thing. I would just want to say, I feel like we would be better to discuss this on the work session because I feel like we have a lot more to say and like we could get a lot more done there.
This is the last
And,
time.
and you'll have to, Shanna.
3 points to consider. One, think of it less like these departments representing are a lobbyist organization and more like they're representing a state. So we've got 8 separate states at the college, and each of them are going to contribute one person for the 4 total. So we've got 4 states represented, and then a group of at-large students representing the House of Representatives, for example, who are more population-based. So just an alternative way to think about that. 2, giving the number of seats during the election is meant to incentivize the departments to supplement our outreach efforts by, instead of relying entirely on the students and the candidates, to put some of the burden of that onto faculty members, discussing this with their classes, saying, hey, this is going on, bringing that additional awareness and furthering their department's representation within the student government. And 4th, the 3rd point is, once a student senator is elected, they all have exactly the same job. Where they came from is not a factor at all. How they got elected is not a factor. The discussion of designated senators, the specific roles the 3 of you have, those come about from within the Senate. They have nothing to do with the departments. They have nothing to do with at-large students. A senator is a senator is a senator, period. It's all about how they get elected and getting more push to get more people into it.
So I do have a final thought. I am in favor of this. And part of it is because that person with that backing would also be more likely involved in what is directly going on with that department versus students at large, which is from what I can see, it's already a huge issue because we're already trying to reach out to so many people that trying to spread ourselves too thin is going to be a huge issue. And yeah, it causes burnout. That's a huge issue. So having somebody with a direct, like, yes, I'm a senator and yes, I represent students. I also need to make sure that my major, my department and stuff, that they are being heard, that they are representative. And if everybody's trying to go around to each department, we are not necessarily directly involved with what that department is doing. So we are needing to gather information from the students and from faculty rather than being directly involved.
Yes, Emmett?
I missed the location at the time for the
4:30 tomorrow. And then if you wouldn't, well, I can give you my address if you want to write it down,
That's good.
We'd like to give-
but I don't necessarily want to put it out publicly online. So if you would like to text me or send me an email, I'm super happy to write it down after the camera goes off. How about that?
William?
Yeah, final note too, I think this is a great direction we're going. And I'm excited to kind of like know more and be able to help in the governing committee.
Any more discussions? Any more thoughts? Yes, Brian?
Point of clarification, I'd like to ask Sean a question, which is, what is our timeline for approval of this constitution? And can we make approval of portions of the edits at this point? Or so that we can get them off of our docket, such as the nomenclature for ASLCCSG changing to LCCSG?
Yeah, these can be handled however we want. If we want to break it up into low effort votes, yes, we like it, no, we don't. Great, we can get it off the plate and just move along. As far as the timeline goes, we need to have a final draft approved by the Senate, a majority vote. So at this point, 4 of you would need to say yes to the overall thing before an elections ballot is put out, because it needs to be present on that ballot. We don't want to be adding it after the ballot is produced. So when that is, Deontay will let us know, and that's what our deadline is. But I estimate we have at least 3 weeks, maybe 4.
Amen.
Mr. Dion,
Yes.
when is the deadline?
For candidacy or for voting ends in general?
No,
Voting
When does voting go out? When do ballots?
When a ballot exists.
Ballots exist.
My information, I believe it's February 16th, according to the poster I just made today.
Say that date one more time.
February 16th.
Yes. It's February 17th is the Monday, so
2 more weeks.
So people can start voting on the 16th
10 days.
of February,
We get listen
in
to
10 days.
Yeah.
You can start voting.
So next time,
Yes.
when we need to.
Okay, so we have a final draft ready,
next.
voted on next week.
Yes, Brian?
In lieu of the shortened timeline, and as we still have 40 minutes, with the additional note that this is the last major agenda item, I would like to ask if there's any senator who would want to make any sort of motions or edits towards, say, the nomenclature, so we can start getting through some of these things, or if we could suspend the Robert's Rules bylaws to make this a call-in order or et cetera.
Yes. Amber?
Is there any way that we could adjourn our meeting and then have a small work session off the record to discuss this? Is that a possibility?
Procedurally speaking, any decisions that go into making changes on this need to be made by the Senate. And if we're in an off-the-books kind of meeting, we can't have an official vote. And senators who are less ready to be vocal might not have their vote heard.
Yes, Kinsey? Anyone? Yield time.
Yes. What would be the point of the off the record? What is the goal?
To not have to suspend Robert's rules and go through all that, and just get through drafting some of this language and things like that, and then we could always vote on it next week. Were my thoughts. We could actually kind of sit.
So quick, so speed, so
Yeah.
expediency.
Yes, so
I'm
Would
at
be the
least happy
points.
to make a motion for the nomenclature. I feel like the major parts, like in 7.3 and in 8.3, fine. We can discuss those at a workshop, at a work meeting. However, simply changing what something says can get off the books.
anyone would like to yield time?
I'll yield time.
Yes.
Thanks. I'd also recommend that we can scroll all the way up and like Dayla said, things like expanding our protections to include non-gender conforming students. Like we really should just vote on that today, y'all. Like, if there's anyone who has a problem with it, I think we should just talk about it now.
Trans students.
Yes.
Stuff that's easy, I think we might want to think about on the record saying that we approve of those changes.
Point of procedure. So something that we can do if we don't want to suspend Robert's rules, etc., is either senators themselves can make direct motions, or people who are not part of the Senate can propose motions. At which point a senator would say so moved and seconded and go through the Senate process, or make adjustments to that motion as they would be making that motion themselves. So there are ways that we can make it more expedited.
Point of information.
Amber.
Point of information.
Amber. Amber
I
first.
would like to make a motion to suspend Robert's rules at this time to go through this constitutional draft.
Point of information.
There's a motion on the table.
Okay.
Does it?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can cover speaker with point of information. So, point of information. Point of information. If you vote on thing separately, would the student vote on the thing in the ballot separately also, or would it be the same?
Right.
So we, as the student government, put out a constitution for ratification. It is a giant package of edits that are approved by the Senate. So they wouldn't be approving each part, they would be approving a constitution.
Yeah, I second it.
Amber, can you repeat the?
I just made a motion to suspend Robert's rules so that we could go through the draft of this constitution and make any edits as necessary.
And then you seconded?
I did.
So Amber made a motion, Amber made a motion to suspend Robert's rule to have further discussion on the Constitution, right? And it was seconded by Emmett. Discussion?
No discussion.
Sorry, my brain just stopped for a second. Yeah, no one said discussion. Anyways, okay, Amber.
Aye.
Okay, William,
Aye.
Emmett,
Aye.
Father,
Aye.
Della. What's
I'll oppose,
Abstain.
abstain.
abstain? Rin. What passes? So Robert's rules suspended.
So let's start with the renaming of the organization. LCCSG, if anybody has a suggestion alternatively, we can change it to SGA, SG, something simple to get rid of this 5-7 letter acronym thing.
So something like Student Government Association or something like that. I think that I think that when people see that ACCLS,
Yeah.
that I don't even know what I'm saying
It's
half the
too
time.
right.
I do like the LCCSG, but that is still pretty long. I think there's like Student Government Association or Associate, yeah, Student Government
SGA
Association.
had my vote in the discussion.
Oh, did it? Yeah. So I would propose SGA. How does everybody else feel about that?
I like SGA.
SGA instead of
well-
ASLCC.
Yeah. Go ahead. William.
Oh,
Robert rules are suspended.
okay.
I'll do that.
Well, I mean,
Do it.
that would be cool, but like, wouldn't it be too generic? So like, what I noticed is that, you know, like many colleges in Oregon anyway, like UVO is ASUO, OSU is ASOSU, or like, Portland Community College, like ASPTC, ASPSU.
Well, we're currently ASLCC,
Yeah,
so
Okay.
ASPCC and ASLCC.
Yeah,
It could be
so-
L.
the question is, if we just do SGA, would that, people would be like, SGA of what?
We could do
William,
LSGA.
you're right. You're right, it is a very generic SGA, Student Government Association, that's really just for internal communications. When we're going outside of the college where people are like, who are you, who's talking to me right now? Then we call it Lane Community College SGA. Yeah, but all the internal communication stuff, just a real simple SGA cuts down a lot.
Well, and also there's a point to be made that, like, so the SGA is the student government, right? If we're talking about the student body, it's still ASLCC.
Right, we're not changing that at all.
And so, I mean, in large, like, public facing or say at the Capitol, etc., for lobby day, you would say something like, oh yeah, I come from LCC SGA, right? So Lane Community Colleges Student Government Association. Like
do
those
also-
sort of nomenclatures exist.
I do want to point out that this is the least important
I mean, yeah.
thing.
A lot of
It's just letters.
Uh-huh.
I think Yanni has something to say.
Just for the constitution purposes, you will attach an A at the end of LCCSG, that's at the top.
Well, that depends on what is voted on here.
So
We're talking about making
have a
just
question.
Student Government Association.
During
No, I
Robert's rule
apologize.
suspension,
I just
do we
looked
just,
at
do we
the
make
personal
motions or do we just, how would we get a vote going?
That's entirely up to.
A motion isn't required, I just want to make sure that all of the senators agree, or the majority agree, so that we don't make a change that then bites us in the butt when it comes to an official vote next week.
Yep.
Okay, so to get past this first sentence, I would like to just go ahead and go with the Student Government Association and keep the extra part for our external stuff and when we leave campus. Is there anybody that opposes the SGA other than?
Deante, is it gonna affect anything internal?
We might have to reprint some
This isn't
stuff.
gonna take effect until next.
Yeah, this
Year.
doesn't take effect
Yeah.
until next year.
Right.
Yeah,
So
so
we'll have
as of right now, it won't,
Mhm.
but it will mean total restructure after the fact.
Yeah, it's a little bit of rebranding.
Would you define total restructure?
Yeah, all we
Because
need
those
is,
are
we
some
need new
big words.
t-shirts, we need new clothes anyway.
Our t-shirts don't have
SGA,
Yeah,
Yeah, we don't have
ASLCC,
anything on
SG.
perfect.
But
It
I
just
This
says
is like
on
your
your
glove, remember
So we
y'all?
have to type different things on posters that we make? That would be about the
Correct,
only.
and as well as like the plaque in the
That's what should
office that states who you all are, location, anything that had like the banner that we have that is about to go up, that would need to be changed moving forward. All types of publication would need to be changed.
After next year. Do we really need to change?
So what else?
We don't need to, we
Those
can leave it
things?
ASLCC.
I mean, we could just
SG.
change them in all of the future things being made and all the future documents, there's, I mean, cause we
Well,
still
if we
are.
change our name now,
Well,
then all the
So-
future documents and dates.
Aren't we supposed to
Yeah.
raise our hand and play like
We
this?
suspended Robert's rules.
It's like,
Oh, okay. Okay, I have a
It's a
question.
free-for-all.
When are the t-shirts are coming?
What's that?
When the t-shirts are coming?
The t-shirts don't say, just so everyone knows, the t-shirts, the only words on the t-shirts are love your gov. It has nothing to do with this.
Love your.
Love
Love
your
your
gov.
gov, remember?
That's what we-
Yeah,
Did you do a design?
When is it
I don't
coming?
even remember what we decided.
yeah, it's
It was
so,
the only design that was submitted, it was mine, it was the heart.
Yeah. There's no call order. There's no Robert's
There's
rules.
no-
okay, but
Um,
it makes a good
We're
point, this
staying
is not
Robert's
really
rules.
germane. to the conversation.
Yeah. No, no.
But neither are the t-shirts,
We're sitting on
because the
this
t-shirts
topic.
aren't gonna say anything.
Okay, so,
But like my question, when are they gonna come?
I know we're not doing Robert's rules, but I would like to call to the orders of the day.
I
Um,
forgot, like, so yeah.
So my tablet just died.
That happened.
CBR.
I have a
Does
question for
anybody have an
Deante.
iPhone charger?
Yes.
To change everything you just mentioned, is it gonna cost us a lot of money?
Not really, but it
All right.
will cost.
I think we should agree and move on. We have
That's what I was
everything.
that's what I was getting to. So I like the SGA, if everybody likes that. let's move on.
And just for
I
the
can
purpose of
clear
the
it.
Constitution, I just need to make this clear. It's going to say LCC SGA.
No,
just SGA.
SGA, that's it.
Alright,
As-
now, just, I wanna make this clear, if that is your all's constitution, it should, like, you know, when you're talking about it in a non-internal sense,
Yeah.
it's great to mention SGA, but even internally, it should still have that name and then everything else that you do, you know, can be SGA. Just,
So internally, just talking amongst ourselves, I think the intent of the SGA But on any like email signatures, it would be LCC or Lane Community College, SGA, Student Government Association.
Right, and your constitution should match what your signature says, is what I'm saying.
Okay, so you want to put in there that for internal, we're SGA.
I
and for external.
recommend, I
Okay.
can't tell you what.
That's true, but that's, yes, so that's your recommendation is that you specify about internal and external use. Thank you. I think that's a solid one.
Yep, and this can definitely be put into the bylaws as well, to state what type of communications should follow this guideline, so that everybody knows what that rule looks like. They can definitely go in there.
Thank you. Move on.
We happy?
Okay, next change is Article 2. There's a very minor wording change in 2.1. It's changing away from a rule and indicating that this is a rule that the college will hold you to. So it says all members of the LCC, SGA, the SGA should be aware of the minimum requirements of Lane Community College academic progress standards. This rule right here cost us at least 2 senators last term, because the college was willing to make an exception. Our constitution was being held to a more strict requirement of following the rules. So 2 of our senators were not active.
To the Constitution.
So, speaking on this, we have a 67% requirement for academic standards, not
Per term.
cumulative per term.
Right.
Is there a way to write in here and change it to cumulative?
No,
Or
The
we have to do it
academic
on a
progress
term by
standards?
term basis to evaluate the senators every term? Is that?
that's a
purpose?
college standard. They set that rule. It's something that I'd like to talk to them about in the future, but
Yeah.
as of right now, that is the rule that the college sets for extracurricular activities that are drawing a stipend,
Oh, for
funding.
not just student government, for all
Right.
extra. Okay.
And are we still on the road?
No, and
And
if
it's
I,
70%,
Uh,
67.
no, it's
They changed
67.
it's 67.
And from my understanding is most colleges don't operate this way, correct? That typically it's a cumulative, so Lane seems
I
a little
couldn't
bit
answer that.
harsh on the standard.
My recollection is also that it's a cumulative for credits taken, but I mean, the part that you're talking about is something that we would propose to put into, say, the student affairs
Okay,
council to make that sort of adjustment or direct look.
But that's way down the road, and not
Okay, I
a set
didn't
of
know.
rules that we can change.
Yeah, so 2.1 is largely the just nodding to the fact that we're aware that this is a requirement for any extracurricular activity here. And I would love if there was some sort of vote to approve on that, because the college did approach us concerning giving exceptions to our constitution, which is something that we were like, no.
It
okay.
is cumulative, by the way.
Oh,
It is?
Yeah.
So then why is it that we lost so many senators last term? if
Because it was under the old rules.
Well,
This is like totally new in my eyes.
but, no.
When was this change made?
It definitely was made most recent because
Within a month or two?
I want to say within last 2 terms that just went by.
And we're talking about the cops policy.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure, because this used to be 70%, not 60. That's why I was so shocked.
Okay, so the 67% is still a hang up.
Yeah.
And as long as it's term to term, that's the issue.
Yeah, but that is not, what we're discussing, I guess, right now, but I was just curious about the academic standards and where we could possibly get
Right.
involved.
The change that we're making here is saying that we acknowledge that the college has this requirement, but we ourselves are not requiring this of our student government.
Okay, so this could be, if they're academic, under this, the way that this constitution is written, if the college changes their academic progress standards, we won't even have to change our constitution, because we're following the college's academic progress
correct.
standards, so that
And
would,
it's not even that we're following it, we're just making sure that people who want to be involved are aware of what it is, so that the college decides to follow it and rule them out.
It takes the burden off of
So we-
student government to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Honestly.
So
We love not having more work.
I like this part.
All in agreement?
Yes.
Sure.
All right, so,
Yes.
and then the
Half-
second part that
Sounds
Kinsey,
really good, okay.
had brought up, the equality non-discrimination policy, in here, just saying that we are going to,
Protect trans and gender non-conforming students.
So what
Because-
does that mean?
We can make further definition of that, but as far as this college's policies are concerned, trans and gender non-conforming students are not a protected group, and they are not federally recognized as a protected group. And we are trying to.
But they are here.
And statewide.
That is kind of like a tie on.
But in the state of Oregon, they have become a recognized group.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Amber. Is this still recorded?
yes.
Yes.
Continue.
Okay, so
Suspending.
we're just saying that we shall not discriminate against any person in accordance with the current college non-discrimination policy.
Yeah.
That's all.
And then we're
And-
just
And then we protect,
Yeah, and in addition to the non-discrimination policy which currently exists, we are extending protections to include gender identity and expression for protections against discrimination.
Question to Brian. So what did the clause say right now? Like who is in the protected class of students?
I could pull it up, but I believe it is.
Amber, you can just click on that link.
it is in the Word document. I don't know if that link translates through the
No.
PDF.
Oh,
We
never
can't
mind.
take it.
Oh, it's a PDF. Never mind.
it looked
Oh,
like
there
it.
we go now.
Well, basically, that, I suppose,
It's or they have sex, race,
Religion.
orientation, and
religion.
religion.
Orientation.
And then there is an additional one concerning reasonable accommodation.
What is
I recommend that you all look at the bias policy. That might be helpful for this conversation.
My only concern with this is the language, of including gender identity and expression. Are there any groups that we're leaving out by only claiming these two and putting this in? Are there,
Excellent question.
um,
I wrote this and I have no experience in this territory. I want to make sure I get the wording right.
I just feel like if we're gonna add in, non-discrimination policy, which we should already have in here, I just wanna make sure we include as many groups as we can if we're already putting it in there.
Right,
So
like
is
all
there
gender identities. something
Yeah.
like that.
something just very inclusive of a lot of,
question for like Brian or Kenzie or Shana? So when they say orientation in the school thing, like does that mean sexual orientation?
I think, yes, that means who you want to hold hands with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So so understand that gender identity and sexual orientation are not the same thing.
Yeah, I know. I'm not talking about.
William
So
asked
say
the actual
sexual
Guys, can you let
expression-
William ask his actual
Yeah,
question?
so
Sexual orientation.
I'm just like
gender
wondering
identity
why
is
this
the
is
same.
school set orientation instead of sexual orientation. Are they leaving? Or like, is it like leaving someone out if they say sexual orientation instead of orientation? Because like at many places, they don't use the word orientation, they use the word sexual orientation.
I'm not sure which one our policy uses.
Yeah,
Well, you're asking about the school policy, which is not something we can change
then
right
can we
now.
add sexual orientation?
We are working on it. And you should come to the Student Affairs Council because we do talk about stuff like that.
It's SFC though.
No, it's, well, I lead SA, or SAFC for SAC.
What was the question?
I'm just trying to ask.
Amy also has a question and has been trying to ask for the last few minutes.
No, it's not a question. My point is that if this is already bringing that much discussion, I would recommend just removing it from the constitution.
Whoa.
What?
Whoa.
Right.
You want to remove protections for trans kids from our constitution?
That's not my point.
On the record.
That's not my point.
Okay, I'm listening.
You're taking it too far.
Okay.
But I meant removing it and talking about it later so that we can all.
Tabling.
remove it from this conversation.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Amy, we got
Um,
18 minutes.
So the only thing, I really like this and I want this to stay in here. The only thing that I wanna make sure is we're being like as inclusive as possible with our language, saying that we're including gender identity and expression to make
Do
sure
you want me
that's
to
the
run it
correct.
by my gender and sexuality,
Thank you.
GSDA.
That's the only thing that I would like to just make sure before we say yes.
I'll
on this.
run
So
it
that's
by my
only,
GSDA, and whatever my GSDA says, it'll bring back.
All right, so,
We'll put the wording of this on hold, but the general idea of it, I think. we're all
yes,
gonna say
yes, thank you.
Protection for trans kids, yes.
I'm like, as you're translating.
Everyone. All right, so 2.4.2, is this a new addition? The
This is present in the bylaws, and we're just moving into the constitution right up next to the president.
okay.
Our advisor has a non-voting seat at Senate meetings. It's present in the bylaws. It should be in the constitution. It was an oversight last year.
Okay.
So
Okay, yes.
I like that in there. That's very clear.
A lot of acronym changes. Moving on to page 3, more acronym changes.
Did they want to vote on
Okay, yeah, if you want to vote on it, cool. Sorry.
Yeah, do we make a motion? Or
Really?
I just-
I mean, yeah, we would just need to know majority say that this is something that the Senate approves.
So
Who opposed it?
I would like to move just to do a quick little vote, just to get a consensus of how everyone feels about the 2.4.2 addition in here.
Raise hand.
So, did I say that incorrectly?
No, I think that's correct.
Did you want to?
Layla, would you call the vote? Yeah, for the record's sake, so that we can make sure that the changes are elected by vote and by the majority, we can still defer to Robert's rules, even if they are suspended.
Oh, what was your?
I was just, I just would like to see if we could get a vote on the constitutional 2.4.2 addition to the constitution here. So,
You want to know if everyone agrees to that?
yeah, I just wanted you to run a vote just to see where we're at.
Amber makes a motion to.
And
It's
I don't
not the
think, I don't think it
motion.
has to really be seconded,
Sorry.
I'm just
Get
making
a
a
sense of
suggestion.
how we feel.
So you could just run a vote now.
What do you mean by that?
Amber,
So,
how's the
I'll-
order?
okay, so since
You want me to?
Since
ask
Robert's
the
rules don't
Senate?
apply, I would like to hold a vote for this. I would like to vote aye. Amy? Okay,
William agreed to.
okay,
I agree. I'm good.
okay. The 2.4.2. Okay, does that give you your answer? All right,
That is
moving
good
on.
enough for me.
I mean, yes,
you
also.
missed
Include random
No,
random,
she said, no, she
everybody
said,
else.
yeah. I saw your hand go up. That was a yes, right?
Okay.
I saw this.
Fair enough.
Oh goodness, gravy.
Anna? Hold on, let's just use.
All right, so this other part here, this is all just us changing the LCCSG, and that's just going to be the SGA. So the next big change is going to be
5.1, we're including a point to get rid of devil's advocate types who want to argue what quorum means every single
What the?
meeting.
We put in a table in this bitch.
all right.
No,
So
that's in the bylaws.
all Senate
yeah.
quorum meetings must meet a quorum of 50% plus one.
That's always what it's been. The rounding up is the only new addition.
One what? One
It's
person?
really a dumb addition.
Rounding up.
Did you went-
So instead of like 50.5 or 50 point which can get a little muddy, it's simply if it's like if it's 50.55 or whatever, it simply goes up to the 50.
So if you mean one person, then you just say 50% plus.
Here's the way this breaks down. You're only ever
Person.
going to have an even or an odd number of senators. So it's either going to be a flat number. Right now you've got 6, half of that is 3, plus 1 is 4, quorum is 4. If you had 5, then you got 2.5 rounded up.
You can't have 2.5 senators.
Exactly.
All right. So
One person, then?
If anybody disagrees with a stupid addition that really just shouldn't even need to be there, please tell me and I'll explain it to you so you understand it. But
Very slowly in
Can you say plus one
It's-
person?
that's what it was. We're adding the rounding up so people can understand it because they're not understanding it.
Yeah, but it said plus one, no person.
Plus one. You want to say plus one person?
Yeah, or senator. I mean,
50%.
that's what it says now. 50% of the seated senators plus 1.
I think he's saying the language is confusing, so someone could read this and assume 51%.
that's me.
Not
Um,
50% of
when I
the
read it.
senators plus 1%.
Okay.
Should we
That's
I'll
just
take
put in
another stab at
here,
the wording.
they must meet quorum according to the bylaws? Because in the bylaws, we're putting a literal table, which says if you have
That would
8
be-
sitting senators, quorum's 5.
Thank
If you
you.
have something
Please,
sitting
can we
senators,
do that?
quorum's this.
Yeah, there we go.
I like
So
that
we'll just put
idea.
it according to the bylaws.
I'll just say like one
Because
person.
nobody's gonna care in our constitution what our bylaws of quorum are.
And I agree, William, that this is possibly.
I mean, I read it at first and I was like, what?
I get what you're saying with
Yeah.
that, so yeah,
That's
I'm
actually
sure the
why I
bylaws
think-
explain it better, so
There will
let's
be a
move
table.
on from
There will
that.
be a table.
Alright, so 5.3, we're just moving that to bylaws, and I
Yeah,
think that
yeah.
that
Totally.
sounds good, does everybody agree
Yes.
with that? Okay. 5.5, we're adding and meeting minutes, what is this?
This is,
Weekly according.
this is less of a rule as it is indicating what Oregon public meeting laws say.
Okay.
So Oregon public meeting laws require meeting minutes be made available to anybody interested, and this is bringing that up to include the meeting minutes also should be included, which they always are, it's just adding it here,
So it's
Is there-
basically a following a technicality with clarity.
very much so.
Is
Okay.
there a time that these are supposed to be given to students by the
That's a
Oregon law?
bylaws thing.
That's according to Oregon public meeting laws, and I don't know what those laws.
I just didn't know if they had a stipulation of time in the Oregon public meeting laws.
I don't know.
They
So
do.
So did we post like agenda or minute, like right now, anywhere?
They should be on Engage, except I haven't been able to get them up there because
That's
Engage is sometimes works.
And to be fair, I haven't been sending them to you.
The agendas I haven't been able to, I mean, I haven't been able to put the minutes and therefore not that worried about putting up the agendas either.
I will state that the agendas, as soon as they are sent in, are posted outside our student government office. And on, I believe, one other board in the OSC.
In the future, if I could get a way to put those on there, I'll try to.
Well, we have work studies in the morning that go out.
Okay, I meant like online.
Online, that's
When
what
we have that.
communications thing, you're welcome to pass them on.
So
Take off your
6.1, what,
This is removing the timeline for the proposed budget for the following year, because it's never really made sense with that timeline.
Because how it's currently set out, we have to have a budget together within the first term for a proposed budget for the next year, which doesn't give us any sort of actual understanding of what our budget looks like for the projected next year.
so.
We just run off of historical data from the previous year and assume that we'll have about the same money at that point. So we would like to move it into the bylaws so that we can make it a part of the designated senator positions for the treasurer, but then secondarily, to be able to make it so that we can do it, say, during spring term, when we actually have projections as to what our budgets will be.
I'd like to point out that we have 10 minutes left. We should think about wrapping up and reinstituting those rules, them rules.
Correct. If Robert's rules are not reinstated, then
Chaos continues.
they have to be officially reinstated.
I moved to reinstate Robert Water.
There's so many more.
Well,
Isn't there like two more
7
topics?
so 7.3 and 8 and the 8.1s, my understanding is those are being tabled for a later discussion, as those are going to require more in-depth.
Those can be tabled until the governing documents meeting tomorrow.
Yeah. I mean,
Before we do that and we go with reinstating Robert's rules, I just would like to make a suggestion on the language in 7.3. I think this is gonna be pretty confusing, when it says like, pool 1 would be filled by representative senior candidates for their senator candidates for the department of their field of study. I think we really need to have something about that like an endorsed, like about the endorsement, because it doesn't really say anything here about the,
A lot of the how this gets done goes into the bylaws.
oh really, that's all in there.
Yeah, it's
It's
pretty
also-
universal procedure.
I'll look at the bylaws a little bit more, but I just feel like anyone
yeah.
reading, this is very confusing language, so I'll propose something else maybe next week.
And then I would like
If
to
anyone
change
can't
the-
make it to that meeting tomorrow but really has something to say, do read this and do write an email and we will read it and weigh it in at the meeting.
What time is the meeting?
4:30
Tomorrow.
tomorrow.
Responding to Amber, I was saying maybe we should like
Just good
change
luck.
the wording of the thing
Yeah,
from
I think
endorsement
somebody-
to something else?
But yeah.
Because if you're like,
Yeah,
if nominating you for
Have to go together.
the name of a senator, I don't think it's endorsed by.
And I think
Yes.
that,
Well, they just have designated
I think
secretaries.
instead of pool
Yeah.
1 and pool 2, we should say endorsed candidates and
Okay,
non-endorsed
yeah.
candidates, maybe.
Or students at
Or
large.
students at large.
We can talk about it.
Just so
yeah.
that it's very
Absolutely.
easy, because when you start talking about pool 1 and pool 2, and people get them flip-flopped, it's already happened a couple of times, so that's my only suggestion for that, alright.
Can I ask,
Um,
can I ask that we table
William made-
8.3 for a moment and address 8.4 because 8.4.3 was that's gonna be a quick one.
My bad, shut up.
We only have 5 minutes left.
Correct.
for my
Well, I mean, the meeting could go over.
I got a bus at 6:07,
What-
alright?
Well,
What is, what is
Go
the
home.
status?
I would love it, alright.
I give you a right.
Cool.
What is the status of
Never mind then.
vice policy, the status?
No, that's for tomorrow.
Oh,
No.
That's for tomorrow.
So.
why it not posted?
What I will,
Tomorrow.
the college non-discrimination policy, we'll look at, there is no direct bias policy that we could find at this moment.
Yes.
With 5 minutes remaining, did you
I
want
would like
to-
to second William's motion to reinstate Robert's rules so that we can adjourn our meeting.
I second that.
Oh, sure.
Okay,
So,
what do I do now?
The-
Is there any-
You've been
I was gonna
talking for
say,
more than 1
there's,
hour.
Robert's rules aren't yet instated, so is there anybody who dissents to Robert's rules being reinstated? Going once,
I
going
only
twice?
dissent for the brief moment of can we address 8.1.4 and 8.4.2 real quick and get those out of the way?
And then
Like,
we
is there
can
any
address-
further discussion that beyond this meeting that we want to address? 8.4 is 2 no call, no shows in a term, which I agree with, and 5 Smith Senate meetings that also include work sessions.
so this is part of the discussion before a vote. I think that I would like to have a lot more time to look at those before I voted those, and that's just my opinion, so.
Fair enough, okay, thank you.
And I feel like 2 no call, no show represent like a 1 week, but like a senator not showing up for the work session and the meeting.
If you no call, no show twice at McDonald's, you get fired.
Yeah, you're done, gone, doesn't matter what.
So
time period.
if you come back and there's
Okay.
extenuating circumstances, of course we're gonna reconsider, but like, we had a bunch of senators for just absolutely no reason at all last term.
So now that we're discussing
Just no
this,
comment, sure.
instead of voting on whether or not to postpone this, I guess we're here.
Suspend Robert's rules.
I think that we should add some language about maybe 2 or 3 meetings where you're late. That counts as a missed meeting. We have way too many people showing up late and us not getting things done on time.
Is there a time frame of what you mean by late? Cause like 5
Like-
minutes late, 10 minutes late, 15
Late,
minutes
if
late.
you're not in your seat
We
at
can put that
4,
in the bylaws.
if you're not in your seat at 4 o'clock, this is my thought, that you're late. If we are not starting the meeting because you're not here, or even if just we don't have quorum or you're just not here, unless there's like if you're not here at 4 o'clock, that's late. And I think that X amount of lates should be considered.
So my
something.
only thing with that is I have, at least for these next couple weeks, I have club activities that I'm literally leaving at 4 o'clock
Same, I
to
have my
be
class.
here.
Yeah.
Me and father. 2 in the morning.
Like,
Is it
These
fine if we
rules
like?
won't take effect until next year.
Yeah.
okay.
But
I
still,
mean-
And honestly,
you still have to
if our
consider
student
the other
government,
also something
we do
to
have to
consider.
consider other students, but when people are getting,
You can-
when you're gonna be on student government, 4 to 6, 2 days a week period, you have to be here.
Okay, but you still have to like
Yeah, but like,
one of the things I don't like to take morning classes. So one of the reasons that I took morning classes this term is because of the Senate meeting and the work session.
I did
But
too.
yeah, but the only thing like I can do is I'm out at 4. So other students, if let's say in the future they weren't able to take any other classes except that time, you can say after 5 minutes. Yes, I would guarantee
5,
that.
10
That would be
minutes, yeah.
unfortunate, but
3 minutes?
we're gonna know when you're getting elected with the way that our new elections are happening, you're gonna know a year in advance whether or not you're gonna be on the Senate or in a student
That
government
doesn't
position.
change the fact that
So you
there's
could change
classes,
your
if
class
there's
schedules.
So I
if there's a
hear
mandatory
lots
class or
for,
there's only a class offered at that
I hear lots
time.
of people saying that they don't think that's reasonable. I hear Amber strongly advocating like people be here on time. I
Which-
think
Okay,
if we wanna
maybe if we
change in the future, maybe throw it in the bylaws. because it's really easy to change the bylaws.
I would just like senators to be held accountable to be here when they're supposed to
I
be
don't
Also
here.
remember that we are students though, and that like
But what
any
I'm
other
hearing
college,
is a lot
if
of-
say you have, so in my case,
I agree.
there are some of my
Hearing it too.
classes that are only offered at a single time during a specific term. It's not offered anywhere else. If that goes until 3:50, 3:55, and it takes me 10 to 15 minutes to get across campus, well then because I'm not in my seat at 4 o'clock due to a class which comes first, students first, then we are not allowing that a student to be a student first.
I think the deal
Yes,
is we
Jen.
should just try to be reasonable.
Also, I feel like with communication,
Mhm.
notifying your group,
Yeah.
I'm going to be late for XYZ could,
Or if there's a way, if we are able to like at least ask for to be notified prior to being late, and then maybe can we give our vote to someone else to vote for us, or what
Uh,
is
no.
that?
oh,
We
no.
took out
How
we
about
took out that
Is
provision. Also, 1 minute remains.
Let's
I
reinstitute
feel like
Robert's
that would be a
rules.
good compromise for
Just for y'all to know, at 6 we are out.
You know. Make a motion to reinstate
Because I have a bus
Robert's
to
laws.
catch or I have to.
There's
Yeah,
no
that's
motion on the
already-
table?
And it was
60
seconded and third.
seconds before we
Dan,
leave.
So
Nobody dissented?
Robert's rules reinstated.
I move to adjourn.
Senate agenda items for next meeting,
this,
other than this.
not any that I know
We
of
can
at this
add later,
moment.
right?
It's gonna be a lot of headache.
That's called politics.
Anything else? Nothing? Okay, yes.
The inclusivity officer, probably, we should talk about next week.
Oh, yeah.
Anything else?
Is this constitution draft gonna be the vote as well next week? Draft, yeah. That's it.
Can I get sent the bylaws? Or to anybody, Rick, to find those?
It's on my lane, you can go ahead and share.
So the next meeting would be 13th of Feb 2020, 4 p.m. Building 3, room 216. Does anyone have anything to say before we adjourn? Or
I recommend that there
discussion?
be a subcommittee and some work group sessions around this constitution before.
Already exists.
There is.
There is.
Come tomorrow.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Anything else?
No.
Adjourn.
Excellent.
So if you go to my lane and you're just on my lane, if you type the search constitution.
Okay, what's that?
Yeah, yeah.
Y'all have a great night.
Having
Be
bylaws.
good, be great. Good job.
Oh, yeah, of course, thank you for that.
Tomorrow meeting.
Yeah, like,
Appreciate it.
some,
Yeah.
like some of the things I try to look it up and nothing pops up. So I'm like,
Yeah, I can show you it right now.
that would be great. I'm like trying to do my job, and when I can't find the information, it makes me